Hello everyone, this video is to showcase a fast second C build order with French, which I would say is optimal for French versus English and similarly good for French versus Delhi, due to the fact that for English is that the players don't tend to um, push as much heavily on and go for an eco-focused build, the most common one being the 4 uh, Dark Age farms uh, into an age up, which should make it more than easy enough to defend their push. However, this build, if played well, can still hold a full out English push without any Dark Age farms as well. The opening is the same as of any French build, given that this is the most optimal opening for French. I believe there's literally no more optimal build order you can do with French. You can have a build order which allows you to pump out a knight around 5 seconds faster than this. However, it doesn't really achieve too much in grand scheme of things, and this build gives a bit more eco than that build, so um, I don't really see the reason to go for any other build besides this opening, which is very simplistic, one of the most simplest builds for any of the civs. Make a second scout, 8 on food, 4 on gold, and then you start to age up. And I'll discuss further things when we get onto that. Scouting patterns is somewhat important with French. I go for somewhat of a safe, I guess, scouting pattern which doesn't give you as much sheep, which probably isn't ideal. You probably want to have your first scout take the route my second scout took, more or less, straight down the middle, and then take off to the side, or just cross the map and then start going to the side of the map while the second scout scours the edges. That is a very good pathing, given that if you don't run into your opponent, the middle on most maps is where most amount of sheep are spawned, making it a good route. The only problem with it is that if you happen to run into your opponent immediately, your first scout might fail to find any sheep, but that is a very unlikely scenario, so it's not something to worry too much about. I still find a decent amount of sheep here. Now you will reach more than 12 workers before you start aging up, so as soon as you pass 8-4 for food and gold, you need to start sending your workers to wood. So you hit your age up around 240 and you just send one worker to start building it. Technically, one worker building an age up is most efficient, as every single worker after that, I believe, accounts for only a third of the efficiency of the first worker, and then each one after that is a third of efficiency of the next worker, and so on and so on. Or maybe they're just a third of the first one all the time. I don't quite remember the math behind it, but having one worker build something is the most efficient way. Then you want to build a mill. Well, I delay it a bit for no good reason, but you want to build it essentially as soon as you're available to, after you build the lumber camp. You collect 105 gold so that you can get the wheelbarrow going as soon as you can. You will get enough wood to get a house before you are capped, even with the mining camp, so just prioritize every production structure before you get the mining camp. You can see my opponent has around just a bit faster age ups than me. I don't think he went for early farms this time around, and yeah, I have set up my mill to build, but it hasn't been built, so that is quite a mistake, as it could have been have now around well, like a quarter of wheelbarrow down at this point, so that is a crucial mistake. I rambled on a bit too much, but around 330 you would want to move the 4 villagers from gold rather onto wood or stone, and you want to have around a 2-to-1 spread of villagers between wood and stone. So as you can see now, I have 10 villagers on wood and 5 on stone. That will more or less allow you to get your 400 300 on the same amount of time. The reason this would require so much is because you will be getting other things like the mining camp, the wheelbarrow, the house, and so on, and you will require wood right afterwards. It's, I don't know why I've still yet to fix my mistake with the mill. Yeah, now I only do it now, so just point out that must have been done a long time ago and to have started wheelbarrow. Now my opponent hit h2, but again, as things have shifted quite a lot, and with English being usually quite unsuccessful at pushing French with a standard build, even though I should realize due to my age up time that it's not the most standard build, that but it's very hard for English to find any damage onto French. Hence, he prefers to play a more safer build order and not attack into me. And now I already have my second C going before the 6-minute mark. Now, in this build, you don't want to be producing any knights, at least until a later date. And I finally get the wheelbarrow, only like 2 minutes too late. You want to be able to drop down on archer range as soon as you can, hence why you have a large amount of people on wood. I probably have a bit too many on food at the moment. I still monitor him and see how many units he's producing. I see that he's not really walking across the map. I assume that he probably has a barracks out already. Hence why I primarily want to go for archers, as he will most likely be producing spearmen plus archers, longbowmen specifically, while you will be producing only archers. Now in this scenario, where I see that my opponent is not walking across the map, horsemen are a better choice because I can showcase fake pressure. I'm going to somewhat start attacking him without actually meaning to attack him, and the only purpose of the attack is to, well, if I get a worker pick, that's obviously great, but mainly to scout what he's doing and to make him think that I want to put pressure onto him, when in reality all I want is for him to just not put pressure on me. So it's still important to check for stone, I guess. It's not often that English goes for stone versus French, but a second TC is nonetheless possible, as well as just a normal tower rush might have stones with it. So yeah, he's just playing a hyper defensive, and there is a reasonably good build order, or at least used to be, versus French, as English, where you would play fast h3, where you would hit h3 at around, well, you will start aging up at like 7 minutes, I would say, if I remember correctly. Now, I think that is a good build versus French, but only given if I don't do what I've done here, even for a fast second C, as that build does allow, as English is an incredibly safe civ, it's really hard to punish, and it does allow to get to a second C very fast, which is the English H3 landmark. And I see he's building up a few other structures, hence why I responded with my own structures and the small amounts of units. Archers don't cost a lot of food, so building them is nice for defensive units, as you don't delay your age up immensely with their production. But since he's not particularly being aggressive, my goal is to just, I guess, get h3 at this point. I don't particularly want it to be too fast, as that might proc him to attack me, which he should have the advantage of. If I went for a second C and a faster h3, he should definitely have more units than I am. And if he hits the h3 at around the same timing, then we shouldn't be more or less equal on units, as he would have a hard time keeping up with my economy. Now I see that this is not his entire army. I was thinking about going scout to the right, but now I see all of his army moving out, and now I'm gonna keep up my production to be a bit better than what it was before. I move away. My opponent does have a stronger army at this point, and that will be the case pretty much always in this build. If your opponent starts pushing you, he will most likely have a bigger army than you, and your goal is to delay him as much as possible until that is not the case. So I preemptively move away from my gold because I know I'm not going to be able to hold my gold, and I relocated to a much more safer gold behind my base. Currently I'm lacking a lot of wood, so my army isn't optimal. I want to start building towers, produce more archers, but I am lacking the resources to do so. Now I'm thinking about moving my wood line somewhere else as well, while I wait to build up my army. I'm slowly starting to run out of resources in my base, which is a bit of an unfortunate time. I have a decent number of horsemen, but it would be nice to have more archers at this point in time. Now my opponent overcommitted with his spearmen, and they pushed in a bit too far. Got a few of them picked off and allowed me to run around him with my horsemen. Now I had a bit of a poor control of my horsemen. I targeted an archer, which afterwards died, and hence my horsemen relocated to attack the nearest target, which was a spearman. That wasn't the best engagement, so I just pulled back, relocate my wood line. You can run circles like this around your wood line. Usually if you have such a large number of villagers on wood, whenever you make a new drop of resource, you'll get enough food to do pretty much anything with it. Hence why I decided to drop down a tower. Luckily my opponent isn't paying attention as he moves down, and I'm able to complete the tower. This could have been a lot worse for me, but I got pretty lucky there. So now my wood line should still be safe, even though my opponent was able to move around it. And your goal is same as before, just to produce archers and horsemen, and to just outmass your opponent. Now, one thing that I could have been doing in the background of this is I could have been getting upgrades. I have a large excess amount of gold, but I'm not getting any upgrades from the blacksmith, which is definitely a mistake. There's no reason not to. Yeah, my opponent keeps trying to move around me, but at this point his army is cut off from reinforcement more or less, and my army just outmasses his one at this point. I can straight up take an archer fight against him, and his spearmen do kind of overstay. They chase my horsemen for a bit too long. I'm not even scared to move my workers back up. My resource management isn't the greatest here, so I start making a farm big just because I have excess wood. Yeah, but here just basic micro battle. You just want to bait out the spearmen to chase your horsemen, and then kill them with your archers, and have your horsemen kill the archers. It's I would say I always prefer the horseman archers position to the spearmen archers, as horsemen have so much maneuverability and allow you to force the fights you want and disengage from the fights you don't want. So yeah, his attack wasn't the strongest you can expect. He only forced an attack because I assume he didn't see enough raids. Hence his was somewhat of a weak attack. Usually it is going to be a bit harder to defend such an attack if it's done at the start of the game, like if the English goes for a push, and that's his build and strategy, not just a responsive gesture. But it is still doable. You just want to slowly give ground to the English, maybe build a few towers to protect yourself, but slowly give ground to him as you mass an army, preferably not losing any units. If you have to fight, make sure the English lose more units than you do, as your units are very important due to the lack of number at the time. So since I believe I've lost scouts. So haven't really paid attention. I have built a few more scouts because the information is quite key in. Well, in this build order, you kind of play reactively. The goal of it is to spend as little of everything as possible to achieve the most possible. So it's a very greedy build order in a sense. But given French place and matter at the current moment of time, it is a very successful build. At least I find it quite strong. And again, it's not just against English. I think it can work against a few other civs. Like for example, Delhi. You with a single TC, I think you will find to struggle against a decent Delhi. But with a double TC, you can pretty much ignore sacred sites as long as he does not have all three. You can give him two and you'll match his eco soon enough just fine. Now, what I love about this build as well, it enables what is my much more preferred landmark. It enables the um, Imperial College, but I don't. Let's see if I click on it to see what it is. I believe it's called Imperial College, but that could be. No, Imperial College is the H4 landmark. But anyways, it enables this landmark, which I'm a big fan of. Obviously, it allows you to access certain university techs as well as certain H4 techs at the H3. And the reason why I say it enables it is because those upgrades are heavily expensive. You cannot really afford them with a single TC quite. You don't have the eco to afford them while keeping up unit production of the most expensive unit being knights. Obviously you can also go for heavy crossbowmen with this, as it also has the crossbowmen upgrades as well, but I prefer knights personally, and those are quite expensive upgrades. So the second C allows you to have enough resources to afford those upgrades while keeping up unit production, which is another reason why I quite like this build myself. Royal Institute, there we go, that's the that's a landmark. Yeah, so the build order more or less finished with just getting the second C. Afterwards you just want to build up 2 to 3 archery ranges. You build up 2 pretty much instantly, the third one is added on a bit later, and then you try to defend the push if there is a push, and if there's not you get to H3. But from the set scenario, it is quite easy to close out a game, I would say. I'll leave a link to the build memo I have for this in the description if you want to have an easier time copying this build. But from here on out it's pretty simple. I just keep getting upgrades for everything, and then build up a standing army. It's always good to go for relics as well. In most scenarios I would say you will be behind in relics, given you went for second C, so the age up should be faster than yours. Obviously differs from game to game, but if you're able to capitalize on the relics left, then that's something that you definitely should do. And from here I'm just gonna spam knights, because with royal bloodlines the knights become almost unkillable. Even if his army is pure crossbowmen and spearmen, I think you can pretty much challenge that just fine with pure knights, given that the supply is equal. Obviously that would imply that you have more expensive units, but the royal bloodline knights are incredibly strong, especially if you fight smart and only poke and prod without full commitments when not necessary. Then they're basically unstoppable. Obviously with relics you want to go out for the further one first, given your opponent could potentially be going for them as well before going for the safe ones, as a general rule of thumb. The keep is to reduce the cost of production for my units. I see that one thing I have done somewhat poorly here is I have not really scouted what my opponent is doing. However, that's not really a mistake when it doesn't matter what my opponent is doing, when I'm gonna do the same thing regardless of my opponent's action. There's not much reason to scout if I'm not gonna change my course of action based on the information I find. But unlike in other games like say StarCraft, it doesn't really affect your economy. Like there's no reason not to scout, and even if it did affect your economy when you're maxed, it wouldn't have mattered much. These maximum workers. So from here there's 2 ways to play it. We want to go up to 120 workers and then play very aggressive and constantly trade with your opponent, as to not let him build up an army. That way you'll just eventually starve out your opponent due to your way more advantageous eco. But given that you already had the advantage in eco from the second TC, you should have a higher number of villagers way faster, because like, not only did you have a second TC, you're also playing French, which means that you have faster worker production. Especially at H3 and 4, where it's 20%, I believe. Yeah, I did not engage my opponent straight away because there's no reason to fight my opponent before I need to. But at this point, there's no way for him to build an army that I couldn't just crush. So as soon as he is quite exposed, I just engage into him. He cannot run away because my composition is faster than his, and well, is just a slaughter. At this point, I reach the max villager count that I want to go for, which is 120, and I would suggest in this scenario to stop at 120 instead of going up to 140, 150. I think that's just overall better when you go for such an early advantage. And yeah, the game is pretty much over. My opponent has no chance of massing an army that would be able to challenge mine. And that's the success of this build. Obviously, this wasn't the hardest game this build could be used for. If the English decides to be way more proactive at the start, it can be a bit more difficult to defend. But the beauty of this build is that while it is difficult to defend, you can still defend. It's not impossible. So it's not a gamble build, as with good enough micro and delay of your opponent, you're still able to defend, which I am a big fan of. Now my opponent, there's not, like I said, there's not much my opponent can do, just given that I have royal bloodlines. He's building obviously his right units for the most part, but it doesn't really matter. Having a small ball of archers is helpful to be deal with the spearman, but again, not really necessary. I'm just expanding on the map, taking everything, but that's also, at this current point in time, it's also not necessary, as the game is basically over, and it's all it takes for my opponent to call GG here. And yeah, this is a build that I found a lot of success recently, and I would really suggest running it versus Delhi and English. Thanks for watching.